Good morning, everyone. Let's please stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. And now the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to call today's meeting to order. We'll start with the approval of minutes for August 11th, 2020.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second? Is everybody in attendance for that meeting?
I'll be abstaining. That was me.
Okay, okay, I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We'll start with commissioner comments. Vice President Baker.
Just good morning to everyone, and also in my travels throughout the last couple of weeks, I've run into a couple of parents, and they've decided to send their children to private schools, and I thought maybe it would be appropriate for our budget and finance staff to come down and tell us how all of that maintenance of effort money works. If dates and so forth of, if a student withdraws from the public school system and goes into a private school, how does that affect maintenance of effort and so forth? So,
Yeah, we'd like to see the money follow the student, wouldn't we?
well, I'd like to hear how it all works for sure.
Okay. Thank you, Terry.
Yep, that can complete
Commissioner
my
Kiefer?
announcements.
Yes, just one comment. Also along the lines of education, and let me just start, this is not a criticism in any way of the Board of Ed, but I've also had some parents approach me about the struggles, and we talked about this last week about creating possibly a daycare type operation here at the county. But parents are concerned about what to do with their kids. And I know the Board of Education, and rightly so, strives for a safe learning environment for all their students. And while we don't have much control over the Board of Education budget, we do approve their quarterly budget transfers. And I'm just wondering if maybe our finance staff could maybe get a sneak peek of what those might anticipate it being. I'm sure there's savings with maybe utilities, but I'm sure there's also a swing in the direction of more supplies, personal protection equipment as well for employees. So there's going to be savings in expenses. I wonder how that might boil out, and if there might be an opportunity, because part of what the Board of Education, again, rightly so, praises themselves on is a safe learning environment. If there's a savings, could some of that money be used to help with, if it's, I don't know, child care expenses, or helping to ensure that that child, while not in school but still needing to learn, could be kept safe in some fashion. So just wonder if we could work with the Board of Education to get an anticipated quarterly transfer, see if there's savings anywhere. That's all.
Mr. Downey, could you maybe coordinate a little bit of that with Dr. Michaels and in advance of any meeting with them? Thank you, Commissioner Kiefer. Commissioner Meimelschmidt?
Well, I think I'm going to continue the discussion about education, but I wrote this out so I wouldn't miss anything. So Monday is the first day of school for Washington County students. This year will be very different from what we are used to. Our local Board of Education voted to have 100% of the students stay through virtual learning. I wonder how that decision was made before parent surveys were completed. I wonder why the local teachers union did not survey the teachers but will represent their opinion. However, this is not my vote or decision. My daughter wants to do something about this. My daughter wants to do something because of her desire to be back in school. I completely support my amazing daughter's idea. She, along with her friends and family, will be outside Western Heights Middle School on Wednesday, September 2nd. While abiding by social distancing, students will participate in distant learning. Anyone that is interested in joining her protest of distance learning, please bring tables and chairs and join us at the start of the school day. If you support students going to school in any capacity but cannot participate, please support her and her mission any way you can.
Court, what school's that?
Western Heights.
And what time are you going to be there? Western Heights?
Western Heights Middle School, and school starts at 9 a.m.
Okay.
Wednesday, September 2nd.
right,
It's the
anything
first
else?
Wednesday of school.
Anything else, Court?
That's it. Thank you.
Commissioner Wagner?
Good morning. Believe it or not, I have nothing to say today. No comments. I do echo everything the other commissioners have said up to this point, and I agree 100% with all their ideas and concerns. That's all I have.
Hey, thank you. Just two things for me. Friday, I did participate with Mr. Downey and Earl Stoner over the phone about beginning a process for them to come in and present us a plan of different processes to begin opening up to the public. So they're to be scheduled next week to come in and present that in paper or as an agenda item for us to review or to take action. So I think that's important that all the commissioners have agreed that we at least need a plan to show people that we are moving forward to bring people back in front of us. So that was a good development. Thank you, Tom and Earl, for working on that. And then Saturday, I went out to Smithsburg for their annual ice cream social at the EMS building. It was modified. Previous years, you could go in and look at all the equipment and hand-dipped ice cream. This year, they modified it with being out in the parking lot and having information and distribution. Our recruitment retention person for the Fire Association, Chandler Fishak, was there as well. And he informed me within the first 30 minutes he had 2 people sign up to be recruits. So never diminish those type of events that you can't reach out to the public and draw. So kudos for Chandler Fishak for signing up 2 potential recruits to be volunteer firemen. And with that, that concludes my report. We will now move to staff reports. Anybody in staff want to come forward, introduce the matter? Please introduce yourself. Scott and Mr. Molyneux.
Good morning, Scott House, Director of Engineering.
Good morning, Matt Molyneux, Director of the Hagerstown Eastern Panhandle Metropolitan Planning Organization of the MPO.
We're here to recommend the board endorse a letter of support for a grant application to be submitted by the Maryland Department of Transportation for a smart work zone project along Interstate 81. The $1.25 million project grant would provide funding for advanced traffic management systems, portable changeable message boards, portable circuit televisions, and speed limit signs for future and ongoing projects. This work is listed in the TSMO Transportation Systems Management Operations Plan, which I'll let Matt speak briefly about.
Yep, so one of the recommendations in our recently completed Transportation Systems Management Operation Plan was about smart work zones as a way to improve management of work zones through the utilization of advanced technologies. And so in the sample letter that Scott put together, it lays out the acronym. This is a federal discretionary grant that's all about using advanced technologies to alleviate congestion. And some of the items Scott alluded to that are mentioned in the letter, just a little bit more detail on what we're talking about when we say advanced technologies and what that means on the highway. So the first, one of the items that this grant would cover would be a HAAS alert system, HAAS, which is a way that there's emergency alert communications to drivers when they are approaching an emergency scene, as well as the presence of emergency vehicles. Through an existing agreement with MDOT SHA, they communicate that information up to Waze, and that information is transmitted out to the public. There's construction zone monitoring software, which looks at recording how traffic is impacted through various types of lane closures and certain hours, and how to adjust those during the construction cycle. They have Q sensors that are connected with vehicle warnings, so they're monitoring real time at a construction site. What are the speeds, what are the delays, what are the gaps? And they can actually transmit that information to portable changeable messaging signs that are placed in advance of the construction zone, so the public knows what to expect, how to react, how to respond and adjust. And finally, another type of advanced technology that will be covered under this grant is through a partnership with Maryland State Police. They would be purchasing some drones, some unmanned aircraft systems for quick crash reconstructions, as well as oversight of construction sites. As Scott mentioned, this is focused on Interstate 81. It is a federal discretionary grant. It's the non-federal match part is being provided by MDOT SHA. And in addition to what hopefully we would like to see, that this type of equipment and implementation could be utilized in the future when I-81 Phase 2 is funded. It could be utilized on what's remaining of the existing Phase 1, as well as future improvements. Not only resurfacing jobs, but also work that's proposed to take place at the Moggins Avenue and the Showalter Road exits in the next 1 to 2 years.
No fiscal responsibility on us.
Correct.
20,000 trucks a day on 81?
Yeah, 70,000 vehicles, approximately 30% truck traffic.
How many on 70? Just for my knowledge. That's the same amount?
It's a little less. I think it's somewhere between maybe 15 and 20%.
So between
but
those
still,
two highways, we have 30,000 trucks a day.
Yep.
Commissioners, thoughts or comments in support of the letter? Motion to support it? Terry's got a motion to support.
Oh, you
There's
want
a
the motion, I'm sorry.
Is it a motion?
is a consensus or motion that we need?
Consensus, probably.
Either way.
Either's fine.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
I just have a quick comment if I can. Thank you for the letter and your work with transportation in the county. We hear a lot about how truck traffic impacts our county. Obviously, it's needed for commerce, but it also poses some safety and other issues. Maybe another time we could have you come back and talk about the full impact of truck stops in our community, and I'd be interested in learning more about that. I know that's a concern I hear from many of our citizens, and sounds like you're our resident expert.
Scott, don't we have a transportation tour coming up shortly?
Yes, I was gonna
And
share
that's
the
the same thing that we usually meet at the library, which covers all the things he's requesting?
Yes,
So we're gonna do that virtual this year?
yes. So the second part of this discussion, if that's gonna move forward, is just about the I-81 infra grant. So Sarah agrees, back in June, shared with you that we did not receive the grant. And as part of that, this letter of support, we've again noted to the Secretary of Transportation, US DOT, that I-81 widening remains a high priority for Washington County. So we had a debriefing meeting with US DOT officials regarding the grant and where we fell short. What they shared with us was 14 of 77 applications were awarded. And of the 14 of the 37 made it to the Secretary's desk. We were in the bottom half of the applications based on their scoring system. And one of the project requirements was the benefit cost ratio. And there's discussion, and that's part of what you're asking about with the truck travel and the amount of crashes in the area. Those numbers were reviewed by US DOT differently than the state. So we need to revisit that, and that was one of the issues why we didn't rank higher. I know you asked about ranking and where we stood with that. So we're in the bottom half as mentioned, and it was disappointing to see that. However, we're gonna continue to pursue the request from the state to continue to look at additional grants moving forward. The end of the infra grant, I believe, was this last year, so they're gonna look at funding, of course, with COVID-19. We don't know where that's gonna go, but US DOT believes there'll be some sort of program moving forward here, and we'll keep in line with that. So as we move forward, the MDOT tour and the pre-tour we held remotely, and we'll have announcements made about how to log into that, but it's gonna be held Thursday, October 8th at 10 a.m. We're gonna hold it via Zoom and then look at live stream option feeds also. So Thursday, October 8th at 10 a.m. would be the MDOT tour meeting. Staff in the county has a meeting with staff from MDOT for the pre-tour on Thursday, September 24th at 1 p.m. And that's also remotely. So moving forward, we'll have some announcements through our PR department about how you can be active when it comes to hearing about more with our transportation priorities. Again, this year, number one priority is I-81 widening. So we're gonna talk more about that and reflect upon, where the grant is, how we can move forward with the state. One benefit to what we're bringing for you today with a letter of support is temporary work zones or traffic work zones, and smart technology is still an important part of the puzzle. If we can't move forward with improvements to widening, to have other improvements in the interim is still a step forward for us. So we'd like to see all the grant funding we can get moving forward on that, but we're not gonna stop, moving forward with plans to, see what we can do to leverage more funding from others when it comes to I-81 widening.
One comment, I think Commissioner Kiefer was alluding to it. there's a tremendous amount of economic loss when 81 and 70 is shut down for any length of time. The transfer of commerce, employees waiting to get to work. So it is to our benefit to have these projects to move forward and help our local economy, not just to repair a road, but there's extending circumstances that have a greater financial impact on our community, correct?
Absolutely.
If I could add to that,
Yeah, what was the estimated per hour loss of money? I think there was something like that. If you don't recall, that's okay. I think it's several $100,000 every time there's an accident,
It was.
loss of commerce.
I think in the previous application, both Volvo and the Valley Mall for the infra provided the actual hard numbers down to the minute, and it was significant, the amount of economic
Okay.
loss.
I would just add to that, you know, it certainly is a double-edged sword. Commerce, very important jobs now, probably more than ever. But I'm not exactly sure if that format, that meeting that you have planned is exactly what I was referring to. If we could have some conversations dedicated around truck travel, the pros and the cons, we can't eliminate it, we can't stop it, and we need it. But something a bit more narrowed, a bit more focused, I think would be helpful for us.
All right, nice
Just a
suggestion.
suggestion.
Gentlemen, anything else?
I just have a quick question. I know not this past summer, but the previous Mako session, one of the things that we talked about was I don't know the proper terminology, but the sign on 70 that you can change what it is, the accident sign. It happens to be right after the last exit of 70, right before 81. So if there's an accident on 81, you get the sign, you can't go anywhere. I know there was a discussion about trying to move that before the 70 exit so we could help alleviate some of the traffic there. The last thing that I heard is that they put the sign there because that's where the electrical hookups, and it was going to cost a lot of money more to move it before the 70. Is there anything update on that, or have you heard? It's probably
I think the last communication I received, Commissioner, was the same one you did. That it was my understanding the intent was to alert folks about traffic even further west on 70, and that there was some lack of communication infrastructure that would cost additional funds to move it further east. That being said, in the TSMO plan we just completed that Scott referenced, we laid out a fairly comprehensive ITS system that looked at where can we have additional, those are like dynamic messaging systems, so
Yeah.
DMSs. So where can we have additional DMSs? Where can we have pre-entry DMSs? So, for example, if you're coming down the dual highway, you're about to hop on 70, and you want to head to 81, there could be a sign before you hit that exit saying, don't, there's a, keep heading south, work around a detour, as well as other technologies. So additional closed circuit TVs to help monitor, traffic cues where there's accidents and things like that. So we have provided all that information in advance of the tour to MDOT, to their SHA folks, their chart folks, and it's my hope they will start implementing some of those recommendations for additional dynamic messaging signs. So that one is not just, as you were saying, kind of freestanding just past the Downsville Pike.
Yeah.
And essentially, once you pass it, if you have a problem at the 8170 interchange, you're in that. You're part of the problem,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
Thanks.
Mr. Molinax, thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Commissioners.
Continuing with staff comments, is there anyone next? Thank you for cleaning that area, appreciate that. Any other staff comments? Seeing none, Krista? Mr. Downey?
I don't have anything this morning.
All right,
Thank you.
you're welcome. We will now proceed with an agenda item, Old and Rural Legacy. Chris Boggs, please come forward, introduce the matter.
Morning. All right, so this week we've got the Drew S. Olden Rural Legacy Easement Project. He's got 184 acres there on Roarsville Road, just south of Main Street, Roarsville. It's going to preserve the nice scenic and environmental and pretty historic property down there. It's mostly hay, cropland, and a significant swath of woodland on that back parcel on the ridge there. And it it lies in a part of the county that was heavily trafficked during the Civil War, especially preceding the Battle of Antietam because of the battle in South Mountain, and specifically Crampton's Gap, which was just east of the property itself. It's contiguous to other preserved farms in the area, and we're going to be purchasing 14 development rights from the parcel, so it's a pretty heavy hitter. It took me this long to get it in because we had to actually do a survey of the property because of that piece up there on the ridge. You know how that was all broken up there. So anyway, since '98, the county has been awarded over $23 million for rural legacy easements. We've got over 7,000 acres preserved with the program thus far. And this is part of the FY20 funding. We were awarded just over $1.5 million for rural legacy easements. This is part of that grant. DNR supports our program, and this is all 100% state dollars we'll be using, including the 3% admin funding that goes for administrative costs, as well as 1.5% compliance costs. All come from the state. The state approves the program, and essentially, if we don't spend it on our rural legacy projects, other counties will get it. So our recommended motion is to approve the Drew S. Olden Rural Legacy Easement Project, $546,360 over 184.12 easement acres. Any questions?
Chris, I think it's important to sort of remember that, you know, and I don't think some people don't realize it, that for this one here, it's over 16,000 that helps pay your salary, anybody else's salary that does this, correct?
Correct.
And over 8,000 for
compliance costs.
Compliance
it's for
costs.
monitoring and
because
things
you have
like
to
that.
monitor this occasionally.
Correct. Every 3 years, these rural legacy
So
easements need to be inspected.
Basically, $24,000 coming back
Correct.
from DNR to help.
Yeah, and that's part of the cost sheet at the end of the project. So they take the total easement value and use the percentages from that. And they compensate us also for any incidental costs like title work, survey. Survey was required on this, and the closing costs, things like that. So, but yeah, that admin and compliance, that comes back to the county for paying for employment and monitoring and things like that.
Yeah, I'd motion to approve the Olden Rural Legacy Program easement.
I have a first and a second discussion. Before the vote, there's 2 appraisals, right?
Not for this program.
Not
this
this one?
program is based off of an easement valuation formula that factors in the conservation characteristics, as well as it does factor in some average fair market values from some of our other programs.
This is a forever easement on this one?
Was that?
Is this forever?
Yeah, this is perpetual. Yeah, so this will
Forever.
last forever. Anybody who owns it after will be subject to the easement restrictions. And it's going to be 100% preserved.
Okay. Commissioners, I have first and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. 5 vote, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, consensus application for zoning map amendment. Travis Allen, is he here? Or Julie? Jill, I called you Julie, sorry. Is that mass?
I'll answer to anything.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Presented before you is your consensus vote for the Bowman rezoning case. I believe that the County Attorney's Office has provided you with the findings of fact based upon a consensus vote that you took, based upon the discussions that we had. Did you do that? No, this is just the consensus.
This is a follow-up to the public hearing. Because of the procedures, we need to confirm whether any comments have been received regarding the application for the rezoning. I'd ask the clerk if anything has been received at this point.
There's been no comments received. We have not received any further comments in our office.
So the purpose at this time is for the commissioners to reach a consensus on the application for rezoning. Based upon that consensus, my office will prepare proposed findings of fact and bring them back for formal adoption at a subsequent meeting.
Consensus of what you're looking for?
Yes.
I see 2 nods, 3 nods. Randy? 4, Wayne, 5 nods, consensus to move forward.
Consensus in favor of granting the
In
application?
favor of granting.
Okay, thank you. We'll
Thank you.
prepare the appropriate paperwork.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, I need to, this next hearing, which is 11, we want to start a little earlier.
I'd wait until 11.
Okay.
Perhaps we can do the intergovernmental cooperative purchase.
Is Rick Curry here?
Brandy's
Oh,
here.
come on, Brandy, let's do the intergovernment.
Good morning,
What are you
Commissioners.
speaking
Brandy
of?
Noggle, Fire and Purchasing Department.
Good morning, Dave Mason, Solid Waste.
The recommendation I have for you this morning is for the intergovernmental cooperative purchase, INTG 20-0038, for the lease purchase of one used D8T dozer and one new excavator for the Solid Waste Department. Move to authorize by resolution for the Solid Waste Department to enter into a lease purchase agreement for one used CAT waste handling dozer and one new CAT excavator from Carter Machinery out of Baltimore, Maryland, and to use another jurisdiction's contract. The contract was awarded by Sourcewell, which was formerly the National Joint Powers Alliance, and it was awarded to Caterpillar. It is also contingent upon the final approval on the lease paperwork by the County Attorney's Office. The Code of Public Law does say that Washington County can utilize another jurisdiction's contract as long as we stick to the same terms and conditions. Listed in the ARF is the breakdown of the yearly cost per piece of equipment. The dozer for 5 years annual would be $170,820.66, and the excavator would be $84,231.89. In the past, the department has rented equipment from various companies to handle emergency situations and equipment breakdowns, and the rental fees can be pretty costly. The proposed dozer and excavator will meet the department's needs in handling the day-to-day operations. And with the lease of the dozer and excavator, they'll realize the cost savings because they'll have 24/7 accessibility to the equipment, and they'll be able to, any breakdowns they have, they'll be able to handle right away. These two pieces of equipment, along with another one, will replace 4 pieces of equipment currently at Solid Waste, and I'll let Dave speak to that if you'd like to.
Yes, we were replacing a John Deere dozer, an 850, a D400 Caterpillar articulated dump truck, a Cat Pan, and a Link Belt 330 excavator. All will be traded in to cover the costs, offset some of the costs of the equipment.
And funds have been budgeted in the operating budget for this department.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
That you said that these two pieces of equipment plus another one is gonna replace these 4. What is that other one?
The other one will be an articulated dump truck, which is in process right now. We're waiting to get the costs in on that.
Okay, so these 4 are being traded in for 3 pieces of equipment, and we're hoping that the newer equipment's not gonna break down as much, and then we're not gonna have to rent other pieces of equipment in case one of these older ones break down. And I guess my only, cause you know, we just have what the lease payment is for the 5 years. How much did we get for these 4 pieces of equipment? And what's the purchase price of it, of a new one?
Purchase price for the 336 excavator is $394,000. The D8 waste handler dozer is $800,000.
Now, that is an $800,000, is that for new?
No, that is for this used.
Oh, that's for that one, used
Yes.
one, okay.
And used, we kind of fell into this because it's got less than 200 hours on it. It was
Okay.
purchased by another county, I think last year, and then they decided they needed something else, so they traded it in, and it just kind of fell into our lap, so we're getting a really good deal on that
Okay.
dozer. And then for the articulated dump truck, the 35-ton dump truck would be $484,000.
And then total for trade-ins, we're getting $135,000 for all 4 of those pieces combined.
Okay. And this lease covers a lot of the, I remember, all the leases we've had, it covers some maintenance and things like that, and this,
Yeah, some standard maintenance and whatnot, yes.
thank you.
Commissioners, comments? There's a recommended motion.
I make the motion to authorize the resolution as stated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you very
Dave,
much.
I have a question if I may ask.
Yeah.
Since we talked about equipment and repairs and stuff, I know you had a turnover of both your mechanics and they were replaced. How's things going for your department?
Good. Our second mechanic, his first day was last Saturday.
Okay.
The first mechanic we hired was, I think he's been here about a month now. But
Because I know if equipment breaks down and citizens can't drop off the trash, that'd be a bad situation. So.
you know, it's just, we've been really lucky these last few months because both mechanics retired May 1st. That we haven't had any major issues, knock on wood, but Carter Equipment's been there when we needed them. You know, John Deere has been there, you know, but we've been really lucky the last few months with repairs.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now go back to our 11 o'clock scheduled public hearing requests by organizations. This Kirk Downing as the presenter.
Good morning, Commissioners. This is the annual public hearing that is required by Section 1-108 of the Code of Public Local Laws. If you recall, approximately each time, approximately at this time every year, the Commissioners have a public hearing to determine whether organizations are added to the list of organizations that are eligible for funding through the county's budget process. This is a requirement of the Code of Public Local Laws. It is a request by organizations to be added to the list. Being added to the list does not mean that the organization receives funding. It simply means that the organization is eligible to receive funding. This year there are 2 applicants to be added to the list. They are True North and Main Street Hancock, Inc. The documentation has been submitted for your review and is included in the agenda packet. This is an opportunity for the Commissioners to consider the application as well as to receive input from the public regarding the organization's inclusion on the 1-108 list. Because of the COVID-19 environment, this public hearing is being presented today online. The record will be kept open for citizens to have the opportunity to make comment. Therefore, we'll bring it back at a later meeting for the Commissioner's determination. I would ask that any citizens who wish to make comment on the proposed inclusion of True North or Main Street Hancock onto the 1-108 list, contact the county clerk either by email, telephone, or regular mail by the close of business on Monday, August 31st.
I'd like to point out that I think we all got an email last night in favor of the Main Street Hagerstown. I think all the Commissioners received that.
Main Street Hancock.
Yeah, for Hancock, sorry. Main
Yeah,
Street, Main Street.
we are going to keep it open and we'll decide on this a week from now.
Yeah, we'll bring it back for consensus.
All right.
And again, just to reiterate, inclusion on the list does not mean that any of these organizations receives funding. It is just a legal prerequisite that if they are to receive funding, they must be on the list.
Okay. All right, thank you. Next on our agenda, Student Learning Center. Gentlemen, please come forward, introduce yourself in the matter.
Morning, Commissioners. Andrew Asherling, Director of Public Works.
I'm Jamie Dick, Deputy Director of Parks Recreation.
We're back here this week again to talk a little bit further about the Student Learning Center possibility. As we discussed last week during staff comments, many local schools will start the year in a distance learning platform, and that includes Washington County Public Schools. So for many county essential personnel, teleworking will not be an option, and therefore those employees who have students may need to seek alternate arrangements for their children to participate in order for them to perform their job duties. So as I mentioned last week, we presented kind of the preliminary idea, and the divisions and departments most affected who have employees that can't really telework, some of them I see are represented here today in the audience, are emergency services, the sheriff's office, environmental management, public works, plan review and permitting, and construction. However, I suppose the service could be used by other county divisions as well on a day-to-day basis or selectively. So as we mentioned last time, the county does have some limited part-time staffing that would be qualified in its Parks and Recreation Department to support one distance learning center that would be up to 15 participants total. Volunteer participation could be used for some special activities, and similar to what we do with our summer camp program, but it is not anticipated that we could scale this service to have volunteers kind of supplant paid staff for operating the program in time to get this up and running when school starts really next week. So for example, the cost to operate a student learning center, if we looked at 10 hours a day, is approximately $2,200 a week for that staffing. In terms of preferred location for this, we looked at the downtown office area, including the computer lab that's at the 3335 West Washington Street location, which is currently not being fully utilized. So in terms of roughly what it would include, staff would provide before school care. It would move into distance learning support from 9 to 3 with a break for lunch. After school care and activities could be provided to the end of the workday. And we would follow all the policies and procedures that we had in place for our summer camp program related to COVID and social distancing measures. There were some questions last time about the cost and the desire to have this operate at revenue neutral. And so for that to happen, we would need to look at full participation and a weekly fee equivalent to $150 per student per week. So after last week, I followed up with that rate to the employees and the division directors who had initially expressed interest to see what kind of feedback we would have on that. And in many cases, I think the cost is too high to ensure that we would get full participation to fill those 15 spots. So for example, when we operate our summer recreation camp program, which is subsidized, that program fee is around $75 a week. Did look into some other student learning centers in the community, and their rates start around $150 per week per child, and then they do expand cost-wise for basically the amount of extended care. However, they do offer greater scale and enrollment numbers, and so they can accommodate wider range of operating hours that would be needed for our employees' work schedule. So, for example, 911, they may operate 12-hour shifts, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which makes it somewhat challenging for us to accommodate that with just one site and location. So as I mentioned, it's not anticipated that the program would necessarily be successful if we looked at the $150 a week rate. I would say we'd have to consider a lower fee, possibly around the $75 a week range for the program, to get enrollment and participation and look at it as an employee benefit to level the playing field for employees that don't have the option to telework. So that being said, if neither of those is an option, I would say that each employee's family, work, and childcare situation is unique. So regardless of what's decided today, I think in the absence of an employee's child participating in a supervised home or supported learning center, that the employee needs to communicate with their supervisor and any special requests regarding work schedule, flexibility, that sort of thing to fulfill their job duties. And if that's not possible, in some instances, the employee may look at taking extended leave, and they would need to coordinate with their department director and the Human Resource Division to complete the necessary Families First Coronavirus Response Act paperwork. So in some instances, it may be in the employee's best financial interest to take the extended paid family leave versus working and paying for the cost of childcare. So basically what that is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act allows up to 12 weeks of excused leave to care for, in this case it would be a child due to school closures, and then the county would pay for 2/3 of their salary for that portion of time, and they could look to supplement that. So in some cases that may be in their best interest. So for example, if an employee has 2 children that would need care, if we're looking at the $150 per week rate, they would need to be making $47,000 or more for it to be in their best financial interest to pay for that child care and come to work versus remaining at home. So that will be the situation I think some of our employees may be in, and we can work with them through that decision-making process. So, Jamie, do you want to add anything as far as the program and what we need to look at doing?
Not really. The biggest thing is we just went through the summer. It was a successful program. We do have staff, we do have resources, but my main concern moving forward, if we did, obviously 50 hours a week. Right now we have 4 staff that are committed to helping. We would need to get additional staff to do that. So,
You know, just some quick observation. I thought the student learning was a pretty good idea. Now I'm not so sure. I think there's so many negatives that we could come up with right away. We can't break neutral, and then it's always the question is the people who are paying the taxpayers, are they going to be very happy if we're subsidizing child care for employees on their dollar? That would bother me. I think also that it's not open to the county because we can't do that, and then we're also competing with. It was said there the other day. I think Dr. Michaels had a meeting with the daycare. It was 80 daycares. I don't want to be undercutting daycares because I researched it too. They're 150 to 250 a week, and we offered for 75. We're sort of competing against our own businesses. So I have a lot of concerns. I'd like to hear from the rest of the commissioners. I think probably one of the deal killers for me is the price and the fact that we're using taxpayers' money to subsidize, and not to mention that people don't have children. Are they gonna, in the county environment here, is that gonna be a bone of contention? It just opens a whole bunch of things that I'm not prepared to agree with at this point. At least that's my opinion. Now, someone changed my mind. I'm willing to hear from everybody else.
Yeah, I agree with Randy on a lot of what he just said there. My thoughts are, just sitting here listening to you, if we have all of these daycare providers here in Washington County, maybe it would be just as simple to put together a list of all of the daycare centers and give the employees phone number and the names of the daycare centers.
Yeah, I think I would agree, and I think if nothing else, it's been enlightening and educational experience, and probably each of the directors behind you could talk more specifically about the employees that they have and their situation. And I think cost is a big factor. That's a lot of money when you're talking about paying that each week. So I know Washington County employees aren't necessarily unique in that way. I did have a conversation with one of the larger service providers and trying to get an idea of the types of kids that they're getting and the reasons that they're there. And so I think it's a community-wide challenge, and we're not unique in that way. And so if nothing else, it's to kind of illuminate, some of the challenges that some of our employees are going to be facing, this fall, and the commitment that they do have to doing their job, because it's not easy.
Andrew, a few questions and comments I have. I'm not a parent, but I feel for those parents who, as one told me, it feels like they're funding their child's education twice. Once through their taxes as they normally would, and then a second time to pay someone to help facilitate that online learning. So it's like we're creating a second Board of Education almost. I support an idea like this. I still do. I know many other companies out there are providing that, doing something to help assist parents. I wonder, we were told about this employee incentive program that we have that's maybe a little underutilized. Could funding for that be used maybe on a temporary basis until the volunteers could go through a background check? Could we maybe have a holdover of those summer employees who were working with the summer camp students, have them kind of get the program started until volunteers could be put into place? Is there room in that employee incentive program to use this? Can we expand that option within that program so we know gym memberships are included and stuff? It's probably not going to pay for all of it, but could that help subsidize it?
Right. I mean, I think, at that point, a cost is a cost. The personal development fund, I think what you're referring to, I believe is $120 per person. So, I mean, it may cover
Pays a week.
1 week. So, I mean, long term, if we're looking at this, and I don't know what the school board's ultimate plan is, if this will continue indefinitely, if it's short term, and then they made some announcements regarding some of their employees about when they would plan to provide more information on the decision. But I don't think we know how long this may go on, and so that's some of our concern, because at this point, Public Works is simply just offering, I suppose, the platform and the staff to operate it. But even among our staff, we wouldn't be the ones predominantly in need and looking at this. I think some of the other people in the audience have staff members that are more in need. So ultimately, if it comes from some account, it's still the county paying for it in one way or another, whether it's budgeted. And some of the questions are going to come down to, if an employee does decide to take the Family First leave, the county needs to pay them the prescribed amount. And so in some cases, if that employee is basically providing service that's not an hourly service, we just won't get that service back.
Would that be funded through the CARES Act?
Yes, but my understanding,
So it
maybe
doesn't
somebody
come
else can
directly
answer
out of
this.
the coffers of the taxpayers, it comes through the CARES Act reimbursement.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works on the public side. Maybe someone in HR could answer that. On the private side, apparently it's supposed to be made up through a tax credit, but obviously we don't pay taxes, so it's a little bit unique. But initially, the payment comes from the employer, or in this case, the county, for that leave pay. In someone's situation where they have an hourly service, like say a 911 operator, if they're not there, then you need to fill their hours with somebody else. So I don't think it's an easy answer to say, here's what the cost would be if we don't do anything, if we do something. If I had to say right now, I think the additional cost would be for us to operate this service based on the number of responses we got and potentially the number of employees that may be looking at leave. But I think in most cases, people are trying to cobble together some sort of childcare through family or some other network to make it work, rather than paying, the childcare providers. Because at this point, most of those folks have probably already made their decision, and at this point, they're just looking for maybe a better option. So I don't know if there's anyone in the gallery that would have, something related to their specific employees that would weigh in, but I can say pretty definitively, I don't think we would have at $150, 15 or 14 participants. And so anything less than that would certainly, to Randy's point, be a cost to the county.
How do you select the 15?
Well, if we did have to eliminate that, I think we would try to give preference to full enrollment. So people that have a weekly commitment, I think age is a consideration. In Maryland, legally, you can't be, I believe, under the age of 8 and unsupervised at your
Would there be
house.
a committee to select them?
I mean, if it came to that,
Yeah, we've never done something like this.
Yeah.
So.
You said there might be additional employees.
Time did all that school be back in session?
Jamie, didn't you say there might be additional employees?
Yeah, because right now we have 4 that are committed, and 50 hours a week. If you deal with like maybe a time off or an online class or vacation, so we would definitely to facilitate something like that, we would like to have 10 to operate it, because you're dealing with time off and stuff.
Why I asked that question, we have 34 open positions right now that every department head are saying are essential. So we're going to hire daycare providers and not provide inspectors for water, sewer, or highway equipment operators. So that's kind of a conflict with me on that. Is this going to be the beginning of an employees benefit program that if they're not accepted, their child's not accepted in, do we pay them a stipend? For those, the one question I have is a call from one county employee, he didn't have any kids. He felt like he should receive a stipend. He shouldn't be punished for not having a child if this becomes an employee's benefit. The other is the uncertainty of the school board. This could be, this COVID emergency in the way the schools could be for another year. So next year, or 6 months from now, are we going to be expanding this program? And there are the doubts and concerns I have for this. Nothing against employees facing these challenges, but that's why I'm not going to support it today for those type of questions. But I commend you for trying to find a solution, but at this time, there's too many questions for me to accept.
My comment, I think I'm kind of in between everybody here.
Oh, you're on the end.
Yeah, he's a good point.
I want to say first that what Commissioner Klein said. Yes, I think, thank you for coming out and trying to find a solution to a problem that, well, all of our private schools have found a solution to, but our public school can't. And I think this is, a valiant attempt at doing this. I agree with Commissioner Klein. I don't think this should be an employee benefit. If we were to do something like this, it needs to be cost neutral and need to be open to the public. Because I cannot give a subsidy to, and I'm looking at it as a tax. These are taxes that our residents pay. I can't give a subsidy to an employee that I'm not also giving that same benefit to the resident, just like our camp. Yes, we subsidize that camp, but that everybody has the option for that. So that would be a way that I would support this, is if this was every resident had the opportunity to do this, not just the employees. And I don't support a subsidy at this time. Our private industries have come up, like you said, $150. It sucks. It's real expensive. And you can tell I don't agree. I think there's a better way that this could be done, safer way that this could be done, instead of trying to figure it out. Because, like we've all said, there's a whole bunch of daycares that figured out how to bring it in, to bring the kids in. We're trying to figure out how to bring the kids in because we all want the parents out to work. They need to work, and it's a problem that we've got to figure out. So.
Yeah, on Dr. Michael's posting, he said the volunteers would have to learn the online learning for the kids, navigating them through Google Classroom and student assignments, and connecting for live lessons. Are we compared for 15 different kids at 15 different ages possibly doing that? And that's another concern. I had a message from Lisa Starr, who owns 4-Star Athletic Facility in Williamsport, and she has a daycare system she calls EduGym, EDUGYM, where she incorporates exercise along with the education and the training to participate in those programs. She wasn't one of the 80 members, I believe, on that call, but she's very interested in participating in a private sense. So I have a lot of uncertainty. You heard my viewpoint. Commissioners, any other comments?
I just had one last comment for Commissioner Baker. One of the things you asked in your comments is about the school funding. I'm sure you know, but just to clarify, our system is funded by the population of the students. And so, even Dr. Michael put a video out to all the teachers, get your kids in class, because if we lose 10% of our students, that's $30 million hit to the school board's budget. And that's just, and we're seeing it. I know a lot of our private schools are at their max. They're not taking anybody else. And you've probably heard of the same thing. I'm sure everyone else, these pods coming up, of that parents are grouping together and creating homeschool pods to teach their kids, because they're like, if I got to stay home, I'd rather do it this way. And so yes, the school board, they know they're going to lose funding, and it's how the system is set up. So,
Okay.
And ours, I think with state and local match, I think it's about almost $14,000 per student.
On that subject, I'm wondering, when we request information from the Board of Ed's budget transfer, if they might already have some numbers of how many students have been pulled out for private schooling or online or homeschooling.
It gives a good idea, wouldn't it? All right, Commissioners, any more comments? This might be something you can tend to evaluate and bring back later. Is there any support to move forward with it, or? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I think that covers all our open agenda items. If I'm correct, I need a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go into closed session.
A second, please. First and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Take a